The contents of this podcast reflect the views and opinions of the host and do not constitute medical advice. Hello and welcome back to Long COVID MD. I'm your host, Dr. Zeest Khan, a licensed and board-certified physician navigating recovery from long COVID. Today we're going to talk about how to prepare for and get the most out of your doctor's appointments. Seeing doctors, both primary care and specialists, is a full-time job for many of us. It gets tedious, it gets frustrating because we don't get all the answers that we're looking for. But why is that? Why do we leave doctors' visits time and again feeling unsatisfied? Is it only because we don't have research-based options for long COVID, or is there something inherent in the system? There is something inherent in the system that prevents us from having as gratifying experience as we can. And I'm going to explain why. I want to give you some insight into the life and constraints in which a doctor lives and share with you how I prepare and make the most out of every one of my doctor visits. So let's get started. There are things I want you to know about the life and job of being a doctor. I have used terms in this podcast, including medical provider or healthcare provider, but today I'm going to talk about doctors because that's the job I know the most, and a lot of these constraints are especially strong on physicians. I want you to know these constraints because I want you to be able to use the system as best you can, and you can do that best when you know how the system works. It's also helpful to know where the weaknesses lie. There are influences outside of a physician's control and certainly things that we as doctors do not like about the healthcare system that directly impacts our interactions with patients. The first one is this: many of us do not own or have any ownership in our medical practice. And furthermore, many of us do not have say in our medical practices. Many of us work within systems in which physicians don't have a lot of power. More and more, medicine has become corporatized. It is a business, and too few of the C-suites are occupied by clinicians, people who actually provide patient care. Instead, they're being run by people who have no medical background, who are trained in business administration, and who are focused on meeting metrics of profit, efficiency, and generating revenue. Even if your hospital system is nonprofit or not-for-profit, revenue and cost are closely followed. Insurance companies, most of which are private in the United States, dictate the way the healthcare system works to a significant extent. Health insurance, in theory, allows people to access medical care here in the United States, but far too often restricts the medical care that would be most appropriate for patients and certainly makes the process of accessing care difficult. This is the way the system was built. It is intended in many ways, especially in prior authorization, to restrict the use of resources. It is intended to make it hard to access resources and access healthcare. Putting this together, I want you to know that doctors have bosses many times who are not doctors themselves, who are dictating what this doctor should focus on. And too often, that focus is insurance reimbursement and profitability. Physicians are being asked to see more and more patients in the day, to take on more lowly paid or unpaid work like call coverage for hospital systems. They have to spend a lot of time focused on the needs of a computer system, and they are being asked to do heaps of paperwork in order for their patients to access the healthcare that they are paying for. Physician metrics like efficiency are being followed, in addition to resource utilization. How many tests is this doctor ordering? Their reputations are at risk. Their employment is held hostage, as is their medical license, which is oftentimes threatened. A lot of these measures of efficiency and resource utilization are, used in the name of patient safety and responsible stewardship, but in reality, they are oftentimes weaponized against doctors, and certainly they put pressure on a physician's time when the focus needs to be on the patient. Doctors got into this job to look square in the face with a patient, especially those who are in primary care fields, to hear a story, to investigate a problem, and to help solve the problem. This is becoming more and more difficult. Because reimbursement rates continue to be low, doctors have to see more and more patients during the day to make the business run, and that means the appointment times are shorter and shorter. America is also a very litigious place, and doctors honestly work in fear of a lawsuit, and they work in fear of losing the medical license that took years and years and lots of hard work to earn. Who does own hospital systems or private practices? More and more frequently, they are large hospital systems. These are corporate entities, and increasingly private equity firms. Recently, a research study demonstrated that patient outcomes were lower in practices that were owned by private equity firms. Private equity firms' primary goal is to generate profits, and they have been accused of possibly intentionally understaffing medical systems and penalizing providers for ordering intensive workups even when appropriate. Large hospital systems have also acquired many previously small private practice groups that were owned by physicians. One of the reasons this is because in the early 2000s, as part of the Affordable Care Act, which had a lot of good parts, there was a requirement for the implementation of electronic health records in every practice that saw patients in a clinic. These electronic health records, or EHRs, are a business. They're very expensive, even the ones who are very clunky, and many smaller private practice groups could not afford it and closed. They were then acquired, like I said, by these hospital systems or venture capital groups. The way that the metrics are followed is through these computer systems, these electronic health records, or EHR. When a doctor walks into the clinic office, you might notice that he or she will beeline to the computer and swipe their ID card, which activates the computer. That is because everything happens on the computer, and they need that computer to boot and turn on as quickly as possible so they can access your record and input information, order labs, order tests, and write prescriptions. Everything happens on the computer, and the computer has a clock on it. So physicians' activity is tracked, and they have to complete forms on the computer that are tedious and a lot of clicks. But unless they get those tedious tasks done, they are going to have consequences. Physicians would prefer to just look you in the eye during the conversation, during the patient interaction. But when these computers were introduced to every patient room, in every inpatient hospital, in every ICU, we literally changed our workflow, and we had to stop looking at our patients as much as we did before. We have to share our mental, cognitive space and physical space with these machines. And it, I think, has an influence on this patient-doctor relationship. Those are the things I want you to know about a doctor's job. It is pretty high pressure. It is pretty high stakes. Job satisfaction among physicians is at an all-time low. Burnout rates are at an all-time high, and things are not getting better anytime soon. You are not responsible for your physician's mental health, and you cannot change by yourself the system in which your doctor works. But I think it is helpful to have some insight into that system so that you understand or can interpret your doctor's actions a little bit better. It also, I think, helps in your effort to collaborate with your doctor when you understand where their resources and power lies and where they might be limited. So now let's apply what we know to our doctor's visit. The first thing I do before I make an appointment is I have a reason to make an appointment, and I have a question that I want answered. When you first start having symptoms of long COVID, you are going to feel overwhelmed, and you're going to go in complaining about every new symptom that you have that is appropriate, because you are giving your doctor an idea of what is going wrong. At some point, however, in this game, you're seeing doctors pretty regularly, and you're not going to rehash every single symptom at every single visit. Knowing that your doctor's appointment, even if it took a very long time to book, is going to be short, you might want to utilize that time focusing on a single issue or one of a few issues that you can spend some time investigating. Because a visit to a doctor is like an investigation. If you think about Sherlock Holmes, CSI, whatever, you are sharing a story, you are identifying a problem, and together, you and your doctor are recreating a timeline and trying to uncover the cause of the problem. You're also trying to identify possible solutions. It's a tall order, especially when the problems or the symptoms are not as straightforward as say, pain in my left elbow. We have complex issues. I have found that by focusing the appointment on a or a couple of issues allows me to collaborate with my doctor, who is under time constraints, more thoroughly. It also helps me reduce the cognitive exertion that I have to do at every doctor's visit, because I'm talking about one issue. I don't have to keep in mind or try to remember a bunch of things at once and multiple timelines. We all know how tiring a doctor's visit can be. It takes a toll. It's an energy expenditure. So focusing on one or a couple of issues for each appointment can be beneficial. This may require multiple appointments to really dive into all of your symptoms, but that's the way the system is built. It doesn't provide a lot of time for a doctor to investigate you thoroughly. And if you are at a position in your illness where you can identify different symptoms that you're having, and identify flares and symptoms, or identify which symptoms are not well controlled, then you can utilize each doctor's visit for each symptom. Remember, I am talking about not ideal situation. I'm talking about the reality of the situation. And the reality is we don't have an understanding of the underlying pathophysiology of this disorder. We don't have a treatment for the underlying cause of this disorder. What we are doing currently while the research catches up is managing our symptoms. In previous episodes, I've talked about organ-based organization of your symptoms, and you can refer back to episode 3 if you want a review of that. But we are trained as doctors to understand disease processes by organ systems. And that's the way our brains work when we see a patient. Illnesses like long COVID that are multisystemic require a different paradigm of thought. And most physicians aren't there. They're not thinking that way. And for most of the problems that they see, they are doing pretty well thinking without this paradigm. So let's work with what we have. Let's empower ourselves and help empower our physicians to problem solve with us. So focus your appointments as narrowly as you can so that you can dive deeper into a single problem and give that problem the time it might require. The next thing I want you to keep in mind, even before you get to your doctor's appointment, is the logistics of traveling to your doctor's appointment and getting through the appointment and then recovering from the appointment. It takes a physical toll to travel, to talk about your problems, to be in a new environment. And you need to anticipate what that means and looks like for you. So before you get to your doctor's appointment, I want you to plan out your schedule to maximize the chances that you're going to be well enough on the day of the appointment to travel. I want you to think about and plan your transportation. I want you to give yourself enough time that you arrive to the doctor's appointment on time. Most doctor's offices will help with transportation from your car to the clinic, but they cannot and are not obligated to accommodate you if you are quite late to the appointment. Remember, this clinic is running on constraints. It is not personal. They have to answer to another entity. I want you to, by the time you get to the clinic appointment, I want you to have enough cognitive energy to participate in the visit. Otherwise, it's not going to be useful. Use notes if you need to. Bring a friend if you need to help you navigate the conversation. But plan in advance so you can actually get some benefit from the effort that it takes to get there. And then, before you go to the doctor's appointment, I want you to plan for your recovery afterwards. Everyone is different and your own body changes with time. We know that. But you might have some idea of how tired you generally are after a doctor appointment. or the travel. Have a plan in place of how you are going to recover at home. Block off time if you can. If you're working, jumping on a Zoom call right after your appointment might not be the best thing for you. So if you can avoid it, then please do. Set some time to rest after your visit. Let's make sure that we honor our bodies where they are and meet them where they are. Just because we used to be able to make a short trip and turn around really quickly, it doesn't mean that we can today. And this practice is, part of a larger practice of getting in tune with our bodies, admitting what we need, and verbalizing what we need, even if we're verbalizing that to ourselves. Next, also in preparation for the visit, I want to talk about information and previous clinic notes or lab workup. Most doctors' offices, or like all doctors' offices in the United States, have electronic health records. There is more than one software for these EHRs, and you have the option of linking notes and your electronic health record from one institution to another. So do that if you choose to. And if you don't want to link information so that your doctor at hospital A can see your workup at hospital B, then bring the pertinent notes and lab results with you. This has a caveat. Bringing a large binder full of all of your notes and lab work is not going to be easy to sift through for a doctor in a 10-minute visit. If you are bringing notes from other places, please curate them if you can, so that the information that's pertinent to the visit is easy to access. Organize that binder in a way that you can flip through. Sometimes doing this by organ system is helpful, or notes from your cardiologist are in one place, notes from your neurologist are another place. Lab work for each visit might be included there chronologically. If you link your EHRs, it reduces the amount you have to carry with you, but there is a patient privacy issue here too. So if you don't want to link your EHRs, that is totally fine. But please be understanding that a doctor is not necessarily going to look through your whole binder and read this entire biography in the 10-minute visit. You can't expect them to. Now let's talk about the patient interview or the conversation that you're going to have with your doctor. This conversation is just that. It's a conversation. It is a retelling of a story, and your doctor is putting their detective hat on to focus and locate clues that'll tell them more about the story and the cause of the problem and possible solutions. In this situation, you have many of the plot points. You know what the problem is, you know when it started, you know how it affects or impacts you. The doctor is trying to figure out more about how this is happening and why this is happening. So before you go to your doctor's appointment, it might benefit you to think about your symptoms in that way. What are your symptoms? How would you describe them? How do they make you feel? When do they tend to come on? Is there something that you know of that makes it worse or makes it better? I am the first to admit that I ramble in my doctor's appointments, especially now that I have this brain fog or cognitive impairment. It surprises me, and it's hard for me to complete a story or stick to a timeline. I lose my train of thought. Many of you might as well. That is totally understandable. And you're not the only ones who do it. But your doctor is going to try to focus on clues and might redirect your storytelling so that they can identify some answers. They want to get to the meat of the issue. This is where, bedside manner or communication styles come into play, because some physicians are very savvy and suave and delicate about the way they focus patient conversations. Others are more blunt and might cut you off. It comes across as rude. Sometimes it is rude, but I want you to initially give the benefit of the doubt that this person is trying to get answers to things that they think are pertinent. Because while your doctor is talking to you, while you are telling a story, they are already working on identifying possible causes and possible solutions and additional workup that might be needed. That's a lot of thinking to do in a short amount of time while interacting with someone. And again, some people are better at communicating than others. And some people really are rude and are minimizing, and we'll talk about what to do in that situation in a few minutes. So as best you can before your appointment, try to review the plot points that you know, and then enter the conversation expecting the investigator, the doctor, to try to focus on certain plot points and find some clues. Now, the doctor has listened to your story, has a couple of ideas and a direction in which they suggest that you go. They might offer a medication, they might offer an intervention, they might offer additional testing. You do not have to accept these offers. Ultimately, it is your choice of what medications to take and what you want your body to undergo. It is perfectly fine, and it is additionally helpful to share your concerns about the options with your doctor so that you can continue to collaborate and come up with other ideas. Let me give you an example. You have explained body aches to your doctor, and they're offering you some pills, and it's a medication that you've tried before and you had really bad side effects to. You can answer this offer by saying, you know what, if you looked at my records, which are probably really broad, right? You probably have a lot of records. If you look at my records, you know that I already took that medicine. I hated it. It didn't work. And it had made me feel terrible. Why would you offer that again? Another option is I've taken that before. It could not tolerate it because of these side effects. This was the dose that I took. I would rather not take it again at that dose because I don't want those side effects. Is there another option for my problem? Is there another dose that would reduce these side effects and still be effective? This is a more open-ended response and one that invites further collaboration. If you don't want a medication for the pain in this example, you can talk about non-pharmacological therapies and ask what is available to you and what the doctor has had good experiences with. You might have some ideas that you want to propose also, and this is a good time to propose them as well. But just like you have agency in what you choose to accept or reject. Doctors are not obligated to prescribe you medications that you want or order labs or imaging or interventions that you want. Patients with long COVID and other complex diseases use medications to control our symptoms. These medications are used off-label, and let me explain what off-label use means. The Federal Drug Authority authorizes or approves the use of medications to enter, the market. And they approve the medication for a specific disorder in a specific subset of patients under certain parameters like doses and time. Once the drug has been approved by the FDA, it is available in pharmacies, and physicians can prescribe the drugs to pretty much anyone. But the drug was authorized for specific people with specific disorders. And if a physician prescribes a use of a drug off-label, meaning for another disorder or at a different dose or a different subset than was studied by the FDA, they do so at their own comfort and risk. The Federal Drug Authority has a database that can be used by physicians to upload experience they've had using drugs for off-label uses. It is an established practice to use many drugs for a bunch of off-label uses, and there's research to back up some of those uses, but not all. For example, naltrexone. Naltrexone is used at doses of like 50 milligrams to help patients with certain substance use disorders. It is also used off-label at much lower doses, like 4 milligrams or even lower, to help brain fog in patients with long COVID and other disorders, including pain. There is research to back up the efficacy of low-dose naltrexone in some pain disorders. There is not a lot of data on low-dose naltrexone, or there is no data on low-dose naltrexone for patients with long COVID. That research has not been completed yet. So even though many people with long COVID are taking low-dose naltrexone, they most of the time have to pay for it out of pocket because the dose has to be specially formulated by pharmacies. And the doctor prescribing it is assuming the risk of prescribing it. We can't expect every doctor to be comfortable prescribing every possible medication that has anecdotal evidence or even small studies of evidence to everyone all the time. It is a big ask. Remember, they are working within a system that is tracking them. They are working in a litigious environment, and they are working a lot, so they don't always have the most up-to-date, familiarity with research for long COVID. Likewise, if you request a brain MRI, the physician has every right to decline that request. There isn't a specific pattern that shows up in a brain MRI that demonstrates evidence for long COVID or is something that we can follow. MRIs are costly, and oftentimes the physician ordering it doesn't know what to do with the results once they come back. And so this might be a situation where they decline that request and at best refer you to a neurologist who would better be able to assess the the specific type of MRI that would be most beneficial for you, if at all. My point is that when doctors say no, they're not always saying no to be difficult. There are real restrictions that they have, both in knowledge and in the system in which they work, that have consequences for them if they order the quote-unquote wrong thing as defined by somebody else, or if there's a bad outcome for you taking a medication that is used off-label and a medication that the doctor doesn't have a lot of experience prescribing. Treating long COVID does not have research-based guidelines the way treating hypertension does. If a doctor sees a patient with severely high blood pressure and does not prescribe a blood pressure medication, that could easily be considered negligence or malpractice. The same is not true for long COVID and requests that we make as patients to use off-label drugs. It is not considered malpractice to deny a request like this. On the contrary, if there is a bad outcome, it could be considered malpractice for them to have prescribed it in the first place. If you are requesting this type of thing, like a low-dose naltrexone, and your doctor isn't comfortable with it, before you show up to the visit, you might want to print out an abstract or the whole study of, a paper that demonstrates some efficacy of low-dose naltrexone or safety of low-dose naltrexone. And if they remain hesitant, the open-ended response might be, okay, I get that you're not comfortable ordering this. Would you be willing to do some research on this for me? Do you have a colleague who might be familiar with prescribing this? And if you don't want to prescribe this, is there another option that you would be willing to prescribe or that you've heard about? The best you can do, my point is be open-ended and curious, because this is new territory for you. This is also new territory for your doctor. And remember, this is a relationship. It's sometimes feels like speed dating, but you're trying to gauge the other person's, beliefs or approach, and you're trying to assess compatibility with this person. And I think the best way to do that is to have a mindset of curiosity. Sometimes, however, you're going to meet a prick, and they exist. And there are people in medicine who think that we are lazy, that long COVID is exaggerated or not real, that, you're just in perimenopause or in menopause, you're just depressed, you're just anxious. There are doctors who are going to be dismissive, and there are others who, on top of that, will be demeaning. There are a few ways to approach this. And even though I am an accomplished doctor in my own right, I have had experiences with doctors like this. So what I do when I recognize I'm hitting a brick wall with somebody, I have to assess whether or not it benefits me to continue this relationship. I rarely get adversarial with my doctor in the clinic because there is a power differential, especially when we're talking about, not physical safety, but a disagreement in treatment strategy. Let me make that clear. But I ask the question, is this relationship worth my time? Sometimes the answer is yes, because even if the doctor is not going to be able to help you or is not willing to help you in one problem that you have, they may be of service to you for something else, like paperwork or medications for, other conditions that you might have. They might be willing to write referrals to specialists. If they are continuing to serve you well and you can find someone else to collaborate with for more like long COVID issues, then by all means, it's up to you. Continue that relationship, but use it within its boundaries. You can't expect somebody to change overnight, just like in any personal relationship that you have. If they've demonstrated to you that they're not budging about your long COVID symptoms or, something in very particular, asking them to do it over and over again is probably not going to get you anywhere. It takes a really long time sometimes to find a new doctor. There are long wait lists, and there are real limitations based on your insurance here in the US. But time is going to pass regardless. And if this person is demeaning and demoralizing to you, if you cannot continue a relationship with them in boundaries, then you need to find somebody else who's going to help you. Every insurance type allows for, that I know of in the US, allows for second opinions. It doesn't mean that it's quick. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it is possible, and you have to assess the risks and benefits for you. You are not necessarily going to find the one doctor who is going to help solve all of your problems and who you're going to be able to collaborate with for everything. Medicine in America is more and more piecemealed and subspecialized, and you're going to have to navigate through this system. Don't stick with an abusive doctor just because you think you don't have any other options. Seeing that person over and over again, if it's not helping you in any way, is not worthwhile, no matter how hard it is to find somebody else. That being said, you don't have to like everybody who you work with, right? This is a professional relationship in many ways. We've all worked with someone who we don't like. If we recognize our boundaries and the limitations of the relationship, we can still get a lot done and it can still be worthwhile. But you have to be very careful with how you use this relationship. Because a lot of doctors who use insurance are not familiar with long COVID and they have restrictions on time, many people choose to see doctors who don't accept insurance. These are doctors who you pay for out of your own pocket, and the costs are usually pretty high. This is a reasonable option if you can afford it. Please be responsible with your resources. And if you choose to go this route, remember that, again, one doctor is probably not going to solve all your problems. Be intentional with what you are seeking and why you think this person might be able to help you. Also remember that wait lists, even for private doctors like this, can be very long, and 1 or 2 visits might not be enough to accomplish your goal. So you need to recognize that this is going to continue to cost you at every follow-up visit. It is perfectly reasonable option if you can afford it. But I want to just, without being a Debbie Downer, remind you that there is a caveat, that there is no magic wand. These doctors are using the same research that's available to everybody, and the research for long COVID and even for ME/CFS is still inadequate. That being said, symptom control can happen. And sometimes it takes a person who has experience seeing a lot of patients like you and who feels comfortable prescribing medications and procedures and testing that more mainstream doctors are not comfortable with. There is no fellowship training to become an expert or a specialist in ME/CFS or long COVID or fibromyalgia right now. I guess rheumatology or immunology might be the closest ones. But if you read a bio of a doctor who says they're a specialist in long COVID, please take that with a grain of salt. Experts in long COVID right now are experts because they are probably seeing a lot of patients with long COVID, and they are trialing different treatments. It doesn't mean that they have some formal specialty training in long COVID. As always, I hope this was a helpful conversation. I realize that my approach to medicine or my view of being a patient might be different than yours if you are not in the health field. But let me know what your thoughts are. Email me at longcovidmd@gmail.com. Let me know the obstacles that you meet in navigating healthcare, or just say hi. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me your story. I love to hear it. Do me a favor, like and follow this podcast wherever you're listening from, and follow me on Twitter at Dr_Zeist. Thank you for listening to the Long COVID MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zeist Khan, hoping that you have nothing but great experiences with your doctor. I hope you're doing well today, and until next time, bye for now.